Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Dark Natter, the podcast where we unpeel and rummage around inside your favourite works of dark fiction. As always, I am John Richter.
And I'm Liam Martin.
And together we will be slicing, dicing and dissecting a particular piece of dark fiction to decide whether it is worthy of a place in the Hall of Pain.
Ha ha ha.
Oh, I see what you've done there. That's like a subject matter relevant laugh, isn't it?
It's just my new laugh.
Okay. Oh, all right. Okay. You just go.
I'm only kidding with you.
You're going with a McBain style laugh.
Ah.
Or is it an
The
Arnie?
Terminator.
That's the spirit, yeah.
It is.
You will be pitching the Terminator to me.
I want it in the Hall of Pain. And I'm going to tell you why it deserves to be in the Hall of Pain.
I like your spunk.
Yeah.
We'll see how far that's going to get you.
You like it even less soon. That doesn't make sense. Get rid of that.
Sounded sinister, though. And just to give a quick spoiler warning, we will be mercilessly spoiling the hell out of the entire Terminator franchise, albeit we'll go light touch on the very recently released Terminator Dark Fate, in case anyone wants to watch it.
So the Terminator.
What is it?
I'm having it that it's... The first one is a horror film.
Well, there are six, I believe
There is,
six
let's
Terminator movies.
Let's talk. You explain.
No,
You're better at it than me.
Well, there are 6 Terminator movies.
Prick.
And I definitely think it's an action franchise. But I agree with you. I think the first Terminator is and was billed as and intended to be a horror movie.
Mm.
It's about an unstoppable antagonist, a stalker, in effect, pursuing a young woman. Kind of a slasher movie.
And not the kind of stalker you turned out to be, huh?
Hey!
Yeah.
Well, they're just a more effective one.
Yeah.
I just wasn't very good at it. I kept getting locked up. I never mastered it.
Then again, neither did the Terminator, because I think every single one they've sent back has failed.
Well, let's explain the premise of the franchise. So, in the future, this movie came out in 1984, directed by James Cameron, and it references a future apocalypse that occurs in 1997, which comes to be known as Judgment Day, when a human-created artificial intelligence called Skynet becomes sentient, having already gained control of the world's, or a significant portion of the world's military and nuclear arsenal, decides it wants to rid the world of humanity and rains down the bombs, turns the world into a desolate wasteland, blows everybody up. And you get this brilliant imagery in the sort of flashback, or are they...
Flash forward.
Well, we'll come to the time travel bit, because, oh my god, that does get a bit convoluted, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But at this stage, it's future dystopia. There are machines hunting down the last remnants of humanity. They're crunching skulls underfoot. They're firing guns. Yeah. It's a grim future for us all.
Was it the first one as well, when you see them like coming out of the water? Or was that a later one?
Oh, I'm sure you see.
I've rewatched them all recently.
But you do get that shot into
one.
They kind of blend into one, but you do get some great shots in the first one.
Remind me almost of the beach landings. They're sort of coming out and facing. It's quite. Yeah, the imagery is great.
Oh, and of course you get the. I know I always say iconic on the show, pretty much every episode, but you get the iconic metal skull Terminator machine model is introduced in that first film. Quick aside, but the original Terminator, although James Cameron is adamant that he thought of it was his idea, he says he had a dream about a metallic torso carrying kitchen knives dragging itself away from an explosion.
Wow.
That's brilliant, isn't it, that?
Yeah.
And you do see that image of a half dead
I'm not
Terminator.
sure if he was carrying a kitchen knife, but...
You get these like sort of knackered husks of Terminator.
Pretty much at the end of every film that happens,
It crawls out of a fiery...
You think it's dead, and lo and behold, no, it's not dead. It's fucked,
but still coming for you.
Yeah, but it's still crawling.
Because its sole purpose is to terminate you. It absolutely will not stop ever until you are dead.
Now, why are they trying to terminate young Sarah Connor?
That was a pretty good segue, that.
Thank you.
I feel like we're almost getting half decent at this.
Yeah.
Although, maybe if I then point out the good segue, it sort of undermines it a little bit. That's a shame. Bit, Now we need another segue. Can you think of one?
I've got nothing.
So, before we come to that, there is just one thing I wanted to cover. Although James Cameron wrote it, created it, I believe he was strongly influenced by a 1967 short story called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is a great title. That was written by Harlan Ellison. Now, Ellison went on to sue the production company because he also believed it was a bit of a rip-off of his idea, which features a malignant AI. This time it's called AM, the Allied Master Computer, that wipes out humanity. And in his story, it preserves 5 people.
Yeah, this is dark.
And just to torture them for a laugh for eternity, keeping them alive just so it can torment them. It's a real bastard, that computer. And in... the short story's okay. I've read it. It's a decent piece of fiction. Award-winning at the time.
I think it's probably the concept's better than the
actual story.
Yeah.
The story's very dated, I think. And the title. It's a great title.
It is a good title, yeah.
But in 1995, they released a video game version, like a point-and-click adventure of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And it features this opening speech by Anne, something like about 40 seconds long, where it tells you, the player, how much it absolutely hates you and all the human race. And it's this really kind of unsettling kind of rant monologue. And I only found out recently that the voice actor for that is... They brought Harlan Ellison back in to record his own hate speech.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate! Hate!
That's interesting as well, because, as you say, he did take them to court. It was settled out of court, but interestingly, he does actually get a writer's credit, doesn't he?
He does.
On the first film?
Yeah. So
the first film?
I'm not sure. He definitely, I checked, is clearly based on works of fiction created by Harlan Ellison, and he got some money, apparently, out of court settlement. I don't know if he pops up. Confusingly, there's a guy called David Ellison, who's been a long-standing sort of producer or involved in the movies. He's not related to him. He's nothing to do with him. That's a little bit confusing. Worth a play, that game, actually. I'll cut in, if I can find it, a clip of that speech because it's just so good.
Maybe David Ellison is his father who was sent back in time to... I don't know.
Now that's a segue.
Yeah, that's a segue, isn't it? Yeah.
So the reason that the movie, having shown us this dark future, then cuts back to present day, or 1984 when the movie came out, is because the bulk of the movie deals with the pursuit of Sarah Connor by a Terminator, a machine specifically dispatched to infiltrate by impersonating a human and assassinate specific targets. So you've got this poor downtrodden waitress who seems to be working hard. There's a scene early on where some young lad drops a dollop of ice cream down a top or something. Little shit.
Little shit bag. It reminds me, have you seen that? I don't know if you've seen that advert on TV at the moment where mum and dad wake up and their kid's drawn on their faces, and he's got a meeting with the bank, but he can't go in to see the bank
because he's got a fake
but
tash.
Luckily he can do it over the phone, which is the point of the advert. But they're just acting like this little kid's oh bless him, I'm sorry, but if my kid drew on my face,
I'd send a Terminator back
to destroy me. So
you never had the kid, and then he couldn't draw on your face. Now, what's funny about these films is, again, as we've seen before with a lot of science fiction, although elements of it are very forward-thinking, the idea of an AI that can build its own machines and send them back in time is really futuristic and original, creative. But they couldn't envisage in the 80s a better way of tracking down Sarah Connor than looking up every Sarah Connor in the phone book.
Phone book, yeah.
So you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger in...
Well, shouldn't we tell them why they want to kill
Sorry, yes, we should. Skynet wants to terminate Sarah Connor because she will go on to give birth to John Connor, who will become the leader of the human resistance that is managing to stand its own against Skynet.
So send the Terminator back to 1984, before the kid was born, while his mother's just a, defenseless waitress who
can't defend herself, or so they think.
Yeah.
Knock her off. John Connor never gets born. Skynet doesn't have it.
Happily ever after.
Skynet lives happily ever after. It's a happy ending for everyone. And there's all sorts of ridiculous time travel plot holes and inconsistencies. To be honest, it's bad enough even in the first film.
But at least the first one keeps it simple. There is a little time travel twist that we'll get to, but at least it keeps it relatively simple.
Yeah, the later
Terminator sent back to kill Sarah Connor so she doesn't give birth to
John
the leader
Connor.
of the Resistance. Boom. Now.
The Resistance, however...
Yeah.
They managed to somehow hijack the time travel machine and send back their own soldier to try and foil this plan.
Yeah,
to
protect Sarah
Connor. That is a bloke called Kyle Reese, who is one of John's top lieutenants or whatever in the future. Now, when we see both of these characters arriving in a kind of ball of blue electric light... Kyle Reese's arrival, it looks like he's been through the ringer, time travelling makes you puke, it makes you all over the place, he doesn't know what's going on.
And he has to steal or buy or what?
I think he manages to reason with a tramp.
Because he hasn't got any money on him, but basically gets a homeless man to donate his trousers.
He gets his trousers, which fit him perfectly, which is lucky.
Oh, God.
And then I think he's quickly apprehended or he's chased by the cops. Meanwhile... Arnold Schwarzenegger appears, and he is the Terminator.
Because if you want to, be inconspicuous and
blend in,
infiltrate the past and terminate this woman, you would be Arnold Schwarzenegger,
a massive gigantic, muscle-bound bodybuilder with a really weird accent, and, because he didn't have a great mastery of English. Although I think it kind of
it works. It's a happy accident, isn't it?
This film completely propelled his career, made him famous. It birthed his iconic catchphrase.
He'd been in a couple of things, but
he'd been in, I think, the
first one.
That's right.
He'd been in something. Really shit film, Hercules in New York.
I've got that.
Yeah.
I'll take you to task on that. It's a great film.
Oh, it's great.
It's terrible.
But it is terrible. Yeah, I love it.
He fights a bear in Central Park in that film. And the bear is... The bear... Not only is the bear a bloke in a suit, but it doesn't even act like a bear. It stands on its back legs and they have a fist fight.
Crazy.
In fact, turn this off. Don't bother with Terminator. Go and watch Hercules in New York.
And doesn't, in the first Conan film, he just punches a camel?
It doesn't ring a bell. I haven't seen it for a long time. He just punches a camel,
and I think it's legit. I think it's perhaps before they properly
brought in any camel unions.
Because in one of the sequels,
I bet he had the hump.
In one of the sequels, a camel spits at him, and it's like a callback. And I think it might be like, oh yeah, hands up, he probably deserved that.
Is it the same camel?
Probably not.
If it was,
probably brain damage.
If it was, I'm not. I mean, I was trying to make a little light-hearted joke that it's the same camel that's born a grudge. But
speaking of light-hearted jokes, another segue. Yeah,
nicely done.
You get the first time a naked Schwarzenegger gets his clothes, which becomes a bit of a staple in the Terminator films.
Oh, but this one is
it's not actually
brutal.
That funny. But
so he approaches three punks in mohawk, kind of leather clad, and just as a quick aside, tell me if you agree with me on this. When Hollywood, certainly in this era, in 80s, 90s, noughties, I think, maybe even still now, they want to depict like a wrong-un, like a young lad who's bad, a tearaway, misbehaving criminal. They always dress him up in like goth punk clothes, like alternative gear.
Yeah.
Well, in my experience of life, the punk goth alternative crowd are always the really nice, mild-mannered, quite nerdy ones like me. And it's all the kind of popular,
the
townies, who are horrible and will pick on you.
I remember going to a club where I grew up in. It's like a rock club, and coming out, and then it was like this. The taxi line was like, half of it was the people who went to like the sort of dance pop club, the mainstream kind of club, and the other half were the people coming out of this rock club. And God, they were arseholes to us. There was I remember this guy in the queue once who was like, I fucking hate Grebos. I fucking hate them. And like, he looked like he was going to snap, like he really wanted to beat up somebody.
Not surprised though.
And yet the punks and goths in these films are always depicted as the bad guys, the baddies.
So if anyone from Hollywood is listening, any big Hollywood scriptwriters, I was going to implore them to change their ways, but no, fuck you, dickhead. Grebo, I don't know, what does that mean?
Grebo's like the sort of goth,
alt.
Yeah,
people.
alt people, yeah.
Well, all you alt people out there...
You're alright by me.
Yeah, because you are me. Yeah. That's what we identify as.
So anyway, they're three, like, punks, aren't they?
Yeah, scumbags. And they're like, hey, asshole, why don't you put some clothes on, you jerk? And then Schwarzenegger's giving it I need your clothes. Yeah. Oh, he doesn't say your boots and your motorcycle, does he?
No, that's
He's just
the second one,
give me your pants, or whatever. And I think he pulls his heart out. I'm pretty sure he just... reaches in and just whips the guy's heart out. It's really disgusting.
See, I watched that recently, but I don't remember. I remember the scene, but I don't remember him pulling his heart. I feel like I would have.
Might be getting mixed up with Kano off Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, that is a Kano thing.
But the guy
maybe he does though.
One of the guys who dies is Bill Paxton, who I think has passed away, actually, which is a shame. And he is the only actor to have the honour of being killed on screen by a Terminator, a Xenomorph, and a Predator.
Wow.
That's a pretty impressive achievement.
Yeah. Impressive resume.
Good CV.
And is it his clothes?
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah. Let's assume it. He's like the main one, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a massive bodybuilding Mr. Universe, so God knows how they fit
perfectly,
but somehow they do.
That's actually the cool thing as well. I like the way Arnie looks in this film, at least for the first part of it.
Yeah.
Because I think we've grown used to him wearing like the motorbike gang stuff, but in this one I think he looks better. Yeah,
he's got his old school hair as well. And again, you were saying earlier, kind of happy accident really, that Arnie is infamously robotic in his acting, although I honestly reckon he's underrated actor. His accent, by being, Austrian, has this kind of robotic quality to it because it's early in his career, so he's not able to... His mastery of English is pretty poor. He doesn't have many lines in the film. And he manages to portray this robotic movement really believably. So he just comes across as this, unstoppable killing machine from the future.
He is perfectly cast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Although, apparently, while this was being made, because it was a pretty low-budget film, a lot of people involved were pretty sceptical about the project. Michael Bain apparently wasn't really had to be convinced to take the part. And Arnie, in an interview... This is a thing I've read online, whether it's true or not. He was asked, what are you working on at the moment, Mr. Schwarzenegger, sir? And he said, it's some shit movie, but it'll be done in 2 weeks. Like his most famous ever film.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Christ.
So, we won't go into micro detail. The rest of the film essentially is...
And basically, it's worth pointing out, this is essentially what happens in every single one of these films. So we don't really have to go into much detail after this.
Apart from Salvation,
yes,
which is this kind of sore thumb of the group, but we'll come to that. There's some interesting, some weird stuff around Salvation.
You're a nice guy,
but that don't cut it when you're... Anyway, watch this space. So the rest of the movie charts Schwarzenegger, the T-800 Model T-101 Terminator, Cyberdyne Systems Model 101. He's trying to hunt down every Sarah Connor in the area, in the phone book, manages to finally stumble upon the right one, which is Linda Hamilton, who does a great job in these movies. She's absolutely brilliant, because in this one she's very vulnerable.
Yes.
And she nails it as vulnerable young woman who's forced to toughen up by the situation that she's in.
Totally.
And Kyle Reese is obviously doing his best to protect her. There's a brilliant scene where she ends up with the police in the police station. Lance Henriksen's there as a copper, crawling with police officers. At this point, they've established that there's a deranged killer who's murdering everyone called Sarah Connor. Yeah. Schwarzenegger rocks up and he gives it I think he goes to the front desk, asks a question. They won't speak to him, so he says, I'll be back.
And there we go.
And then he does come back, drives a truck through the front of the building, and then just massacres everyone in the police station. Yeah. They're getting out all the emergency artillery, the massive guns. He just doesn't care. Bullets are just bouncing off him. It's brilliant. Yeah. Because she's been through this. She's been told all the future and what's going to happen, and how she's going to become this important figure in the resistance by Kyle Reese. Now she's been told that Reese is a crazy crackpot, lunatic who's not to be trusted, and now she's seen all these police that she thought would be able to protect her being helplessly slaughtered.
It's that thing, seeing is believing, basically.
Yeah.
It's done very well, because you would, if somebody did come back and tell you, you would think they were nuts.
Correct.
But then you also can see that you need protecting because somebody's killing Sarah Connors.
Correct.
And then you see this...
It's seemingly invincible colossus.
So you know something's up, basically. Yeah. It is well done, yeah.
Brilliant. So,
and actually, just to bring it back to a couple of episodes ago, in the Halloween episode, you were talking about Michael Myers and how you felt like there was some influences there.
Definitely. I think that probably done a lot better than Halloween, but that idea of an unstoppable stalker...
It makes more sense here.
Correct. In Halloween, we're asked to accept that this big bloke is just immune to bullets for some reason that isn't really explained. Whereas here, it's another big, lumbering, slow-moving, but incessant, persistent pursuer. But this time, it's a metal robot from the future, so it kind of seems more believable, as crazy as that sounds.
I get you.
Now, during their exploits of desperately trying to stay away from this terrifying behemoth, Kyle Reese and Sarah, they kind of hit it off, don't they?
Mm.
Do
you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to give us like the details of what they get up to, but you know what I mean.
Well, first of all...
Where do babies come from?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
They make love.
And it's revealed at some point, I can't remember when, that act is what... He's John Connor's dad.
Yeah, if they hadn't sent him back, then John Connor would have never been born. So it's that whole weird time loop thing, which is when we start getting into the sort of this is bollocks.
But who cares? Because it's an excuse to have a robot monster trashing the place while someone tries to escape, and it's good fun, innit?
But I still think that's as simple as the Terminator franchise gets, isn't it?
Yeah, everything after that
starts to get a little bit iffy. So they're on the run from Arnie. They stay in some motel. I think that's when the act happens.
And he also, at some point, checks into like a grotty bedsit to perform sort of like running repairs.
Arnie,
and he's like...
That's quite a very famous scene, isn't it?
Pulling bits of his eyeball out and stitching up the back of his head.
Yeah, because he's obviously had the run-in at the police station.
He's been shot up.
He's been shot up.
All the flesh that's on the outside of his metal endoskeleton is all just full of bullets. And it looks rotten. I think they've sort of... The makeup they've used to make him look all sweaty and pale. He's brilliant. He looks almost like a coat, like he's gone off at that point. It's brilliant. Well, climax of the movie.
Yeah.
Kyle Reese sacrifices himself in service of Sarah Connor. Yeah. He dies. By this point, they've blown up a truck that the Terminator's driving and melted all its flesh off.
And this is where we get that bit of... He really is this unstoppable behemoth, as you said, this unstoppable machine, because he's just crawling and...
Drags himself out of the inferno. He's just a metal skeleton at this point. He's
got a job to do, and he's going to do it, and you think, Christ, how are we going to destroy this thing?
And she ends up having to crawl away from him as he's pursuing her through...
They're in like some sort of factory, aren't they?
Yeah, like industrial premises.
Yeah.
And just as it's reaching for it to, claw her face off, she manages to turn on the press.
The press,
compacts him down and crushes him and finally kills him.
And his arm drops off.
Yeah, it's left jutting out.
Which maybe accidentally sort of plays into the sequel quite nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah, whether they intended it or not, don't know. But it does lead us neatly onto the massively successful blockbuster movie Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Also directed by James Cameron. came out in 1991.
And that's interesting because what I didn't realise, watching these films back, is the gap between all of the sequels.
Yeah.
Is surprisingly high.
I think there's something, apologies, I don't know the mega detail of this, but the original concept was sold by Cameron to a producer for £1 or $1.
Yeah.
I'd buy that for $1. And so every film has been sort of shrouded in these like murky, who owns the rights.
Right.
There's been loads of people claiming they've got the intellectual property. So a lot of the subsequent sequels in particular have been really kind of mired in a bit of a bog of legal shit.
But T2, if the Terminator was sort of leaning more towards the horror, the science fiction side of things, T2 feels very much like an action blockbuster. But normally, that's not necessarily something you would think is a good thing. Like, they've just made it an action blockbuster film.
But it works.
It's lost its essence. But in the case of Terminator 2, it's such a good film. And there are still some pretty horrific moments in it. But it really does work as an action blockbuster. Yeah. It's not actually that dissimilar to the first one. I mean, there are some massive differences. But in terms of the way it plays out, as I say, most of these films are kind of the same.
Yeah, you've still got a Terminator that is pursuing someone. In this case, it's now John Connor himself as a 10-year-old boy.
Looks older.
Yeah, and behaves,
robbing banks and...
Yeah, flipping off his foster parents. Yeah. She's not my mother, Todd. Yeah. he's acing it. He does a great job.
He's brilliant in it, actually.
Really brilliant.
Yeah.
So he's now...
He's John Connor.
John Connor himself is being pursued by a Terminator. This time it's not Schwarzenegger at T-101, it's a T-1000.
Which I still, to this day, think is... I mean, all right, maybe Arnie, the most iconic, as we say, Terminator, but I just think, in terms of what this Terminator can do, I think the T-1000 is the best one.
Robert Patrick does it.
Brilliant.
I remember I saw an interview with him where he was saying, you don't have to convince everyone that you're the baddest guy in the room. You just have to know that you're the baddest guy in the room and then act. And I think that comes across perfectly because he's physically compared to Schwarzenegger. He's just a slim bloke, or he looks that way on camera, but he comes across, he's got this real menacing purpose.
Coldness about
really, him, and it seems like Skynet has become more cunning.
Yeah.
Because rather than a stands out by a mile kind of blunt instrument Schwarzenegger, you've got this more sleek, it seems to have a bit more guile and a bit more trickery about it.
Interestingly, because of the sort of characteristics of this model, it can take the form of anything it touches.
Yeah, liquid metal.
Yeah. And for the most part, there are a few different incarnations of it, but for the most part, he plays basically a cop, which again ties into that kind of thing, because when the cop starts asking you, have you seen this boy, you will give that information.
Correct. It's really insidious, isn't it? The idea of impersonating a policeman to gain access to your victim. That is a horrible thing to do.
It really is.
It definitely comes across as a more intelligent Terminator.
Yeah. So again, the Resistance sends something back. I say something to protect John Connor. Before, in the first film, it was Kyle Reese. Now it's Arnie.
It's that Terminator.
Yeah.
And I guess this
reprogrammed.
I'm not sure how much influence Schwarzenegger had on this decision to rebrand this machine as now the good guy and give
By
it.
now, he is a big star, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a well-established action hero, and he wants to play heroes. He doesn't want to play villains anymore. That's his brand. So whether he was responsible for this or whether Cameron passed,
I mean, it
works.
It works, and it makes sense otherwise it literally would have just been the same film.
Yeah, it ups the stakes. Instead of Terminator versus young man, you've got, in effect, obsolete Terminator versus this new souped-up, horrible liquid metal version. So brilliant setup. And we get that first encounter at the shopping mall where the tearaway young lad John is there with his mate, and both Terminators rock up at the same time. To one to save him and one to get him.
Also, again, Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor makes a return. Only in this film, she's actually incarcerated at a kind of psychiatric unit. Yeah,
she spent the first 10 years of John's life raising him to be this future military leader and telling him how important he is. Imagine the impact on the poor young lad when he's suddenly told, I think he even says, doesn't he? Oh, didn't you know your mum's a psycho?
Yeah.
So he's taken from her.
She's having it that Judgment Day is coming in 1997 still.
Yeah, people think she's a lunatic, delusional, and she's given treatment.
She's very militant, and she's training Jon up and filling his head with all these ideas. So she's incarcerated.
He's left with foster parents.
Some great scenes actually in the.
In the hospital. She's got that really slimy psychiatrist called Dr. Silverman. and she's like, hey, Dr. Silverman, how's the knee? And then you have to explain she's stabbed him with a pencil in the kneecap or something.
And you get that famous clip of her where she's kind of calm and then she starts getting really animated about, don't you see?
Everyone's going to die.
Everyone's fucking dead. And it's great, really good.
Brilliant performance again, and she's got herself in incredible physical shape. She's completely transformed.
She has.
As a character as well. She's no longer this sort of downtrodden waitress struggling to defend herself. Now she's a capable, strong warrior.
Yeah.
But unfortunately no one believes her, so they've stuck her in the clink. So, T-1000 is pursuing Arnie and Jon, who are on the run. Jon is well happy because he's got his own pet Terminator. And there's that great bit. We talked earlier about how, although this is an action film, it's still got some really good horror moments. And again, I would have been, 9 when this came out. So I remember sort of watching it, and I knew I was a bit young, and I was kind of peering through between my fingers, knowing that, this bit's horrible, because I had some, mates at a sleepover who'd already seen it. And one of those bits is when Jon wants to contact his foster parents.
Yes, this is my favourite scene in the film.
It's brilliant. I think. So you've got Jon's foster mum chopping up some vegetables, and his foster dad, who's a bit of a dick.
Todd.
Todd. He's just sort of bumbling around in the background, drinking a carton of milk, swearing.
And saying, tell that dog to shut up. Yeah. The dog's barking. Oh, why? Why?
Why is the dog so agitated? And Schwarzenegger gets on the phone, but impersonates Jon's voice, because it's already been established that Terminators can do a belting impression. It's second career, if they ever need one, as an impressionist.
Because clearly he suspects that the other Terminator would have gone straight there, which obviously...
The obvious place to go to time. It would definitely try to reacquire you there. So he puts his hand over the receiver and asks Jon, what's the dog's name? Jon says, it's Max. Schwarzenegger says, what's wrong with Wolfie?
Yeah.
And the foster mum says, Wolfie's fine, honey. Nothing's wrong. Wolfie's just fine. Immediately, Schwarzenegger hangs up. Your foster parents are dead. Real sort of tactless delivery. Cut back to the foster parents. Because it was clearly getting fed up of the chunnering of the foster dad, we see that the T-1000, who is taking imitating the foster mum, has extended her arm out into a massive long blade, skewered the milk carton right through his mouth and stabbed him into the wall.
Yeah,
it's grim, innit?
Brutal, it really is.
Whips it out and they all plop down to the floor.
Down, and then
and the effects, yes, they're dated because we're going back almost 30 years, but they work brilliantly, the CGI in this film.
It's because I don't think it's overused like it perhaps is sometimes today. Yeah. And it's kind of used when it needs to be used. And like you said, and obviously this was a big budget film, so they were using the best of the best. But I think it still holds up.
I agree with you completely. And I think we've been on this kind of rant before, but it's the difference between if you use technology and CGI when necessary, because without it you couldn't film something, absolutely fine, fill your boots. If you're using it for the sake of it, because you've got a budget and the CGI company's desperate to show off its latest bloody software, you end up with this overexposure. I just don't think it looks as good as some people seem to think it does.
Totally.
So an example that springs to mind is The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, which I'm sure merits a future episode because it's a classic. He was cobbling together animatronic monster from bits of old bubble gum and wires and old plastic and rubber. And it looks great because you can tell it's physically, tangibly there.
Yeah.
Watch the prequel movie from, about 8 years ago, The Thing, and it's just a CGI fest. And you see that creature so many times that by the end, it's not remotely scary. It's just boring.
Yeah.
So I wish they would moderate the use of CGI in a lot of movies, particularly horror movies.
I do agree.
But the T-1000 looks good. The liquid metal stuff, it's not overdone. He spends a lot of the film just in the guise of that mild-mannered policeman. Yeah. But when he needs to, he can whip out a big, blade, scary knife.
Which he does because the next step is for John Connor and the old Terminator, to go and rescue Sarah Connor from the hospital. And the T-1000 also goes there, suspecting that that's where they'll go next.
Brilliant.
And there's another great scene where he just extends a finger into this like needle through a security guard's eye.
Oh, and it mimics him first, doesn't it? So first it mimics the floor.
Yeah.
He walks on it to go to the vending machine.
It's then able to mimic him.
So it sort of squelches upwards and forms into a doppelganger of this poor sort of copper. He turns around, is completely baffled and staggered to see a clone of himself
looking at each other, and then
it pops him through the head with this needle in the eye, and you see him kind of juddering and quivering on the end of it. Oh, that was horrible, that bit. Now, interesting little fact is that, they filmed that scene, is that...
Got to be CGI, right?
Well, let me tell you, turns out that cop, the actor who plays him...
Mirrors.
The twins.
Hey.
They were just actors who were twins and were regularly used for this sort of stunt. So in Gremlins 2... there's like a joke where there's like a scientist who says he's working on cloning, and then the same guy pops up and he's like, oh, hello, so am I. And it's these two twin actors. Yeah. It's not a special effect at all. That's really cool.
That's a nice touch, that was a nice touch.
But they didn't have blades for fingers. That bit was a special effect, I think.
This is where I think it gets quite interesting as well, because John Connor and, Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator kind of rescue Sarah Connor, but there's that brilliant moment where she sees Arnie, and it's kind of like in slow motion almost. Yeah. She turns and falls down.
In horror, absolute terror.
Because last time she saw this thing, it was trying to kill her.
Yeah.
But now it's on her side, and there's always that kind of unresolved tension between them, isn't there? Because she doesn't quite trust it, because she knows it's a machine.
Correct.
But John almost starts to see it as the kind of father figure. And
so there's a bit where they manage to escape, obviously, because otherwise the film would end quite abruptly if they died. And I think they go to Mexico for a bit, just to hide out or whatever, lay low. And she's watching John sort of playing and interacting with the machine. And she does this great monologue where she's sort of, on one hand, she despises it because it's a cold piece of machinery. But on the other hand, it's never going to come home drunk. Yeah. It's never going to let John down. It's never going to hit him. So in some ways, maybe it's the perfect father figure for this boy who's never had a dad. Yeah. So she herself is in this real mixed state of turmoil.
It's well done. Very well done.
She decides to...
independently from the group.
Do one, basically, on her own while they're all asleep or whatever, to go and kill the future creator of Skynet.
Who's actually a really nice bloke.
Yeah. And another great decision, I think, because it would have been so easy to make him a baddie.
A baddie.
Yeah, sorry, you should be saying
right.
that. Let's redo it.
It would have been so easy to make him a baddie.
I agree with you, Liam. But they instead make him this lovable family man with a wife and a kid, little Danny.
And funnily enough, again, this ties into the first film, probably accidentally, but the reason Skynet actually comes into being is because they find Arnie's old Terminator hand, and the technology in that kind of becomes the basis of what would become Skynet.
They've basically covered up the incident and secretly used the recovered arm and the chip from the first Terminator to advance their own tech. Ironically, bringing about Skynet's existence. Again, it's another kind of impossible time loop paradox.
But it's still not quite at that point where we're rolling our eyes and thinking,
it's fine.
This is bollocks. It's okay. And like I said, it's probably a happy accident, but it does tie in quite nicely to the end of the first one.
Now, they actually successfully do manage to destroy the factory. And this is where we get John is very insistent that Arnie, the T-101, doesn't kill anyone. So Schwarzenegger is having to incapacitate the guards, knock them unconscious, shoot a load of them in the leg, which is not great, but okay. Although, sadly, Miles Dyson, maybe sadly, he does die in the blast. He in effect sacrifices himself to put a stop.
Nice guy.
Because he's so horrified by this machine.
And it's like you said, though, it could have been just some horrible, villainous
money
slime ball.
Yeah.
But, for me, it makes sense that if you did find this technology, just it's human nature, isn't it? You would try to advance, get as much out of it as you could.
Correct. He's not a bad person, but he unwittingly.
Exactly.
And it's funny how the whole series is actually, you could interpret it as an anti-technology fable, like, don't mess with technology, look what's going to happen. But I think it's more agnostic than that, because we see from Terminator 2 onwards, basically, machines that display human qualities and heroism throughout. So I think the message perhaps more is...
Basically, I should stop swearing at Alexa.
That's the moral message, I think. Yeah. If you keep swearing at Alexa, then you're going to be the first one to go. Yeah. I am
actually quite wary about that, because...
It'll be getting stored somewhere.
It's getting stored somewhere. I like on my record to be like, he was always polite. Spare him. They stop Skynet.
They think they have. They don't know. That's interesting. Yeah. There's no payoff. It's like, we've blown up a factory when I wanted criminals, but we think we've just saved the world? Dunno.
But of course, it hasn't stopped old... Bobby Bollocks from...
Bobby Patrick.
From coming back and,
he picks up...
relentlessly pursuing them.
He picks up the scent and he chases them. It does go a bit overboard with the bad guy in cool vehicle, good guys in underdog vehicle. Yeah, they're driving some, like, I don't know, shack on wheels.
Helicopter in it.
Yeah, then he's in a tanker, and they're in like this crappy little, like, I don't know, mobile vet or something. I can't remember what he is.
Nick a better car. Yeah.
But this is the vehicle's top speed. So the culmination of this movie occurs in yet another industrial facility. Somewhat coincidentally,
they all have them, don't they? They all have them.
Pretty much the only place you could kill a T-1000. Yeah. So we get that bit where the liquid nitrogen in the tanker is exploding everywhere, and the T-1000 freezes, and you get that brilliant bit where its limbs are sticking to the floor, snapping off. It looks in sort of confusion at its own snapped off arm. And then Schwarzenegger shoots it into a million pieces and gives one of his famous lines, "Hasta la vista, baby," because John's taught him to say it.
Because apparently it'll make him more human.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who says that, but anyway. But of course, even that isn't enough to stop a T-1000, because as the heat from it's like a smelting works. I like saying that word.
Yeah.
Say it again. It's a smelting works. Starts to melt all the smelt of the metal. And he pulls back together. Yeah.
So the only way they can kill him is to basically bung him in some...
Lob him in some lava.
Yeah.
Because they keep some lava
Essentially the same way they destroyed the One Ring.
It's like they ripped it off from Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So you get this brilliant bit where the T-1000 impersonates Sarah.
Yes, that's good.
John has to figure out, which one is my real name?
They revisit that in a lot of the later films, don't they? A couple of them they do.
Go to the well one too many times.
I know they do in Genesis.
And then there's a brilliant Terminator on Terminator fight between Arnie and T-1000. They're slamming each other into the walls. It looks great. But ultimately, the obsolete T-101 Arnie is defeated, crushed in some bit of machinery, and the T-1000 advances on them to kill them. Arnie manages to get out, fire one last grenade round right into its liquid belly.
Yeah.
It blows up into this
really horrible,
sort of squirming blob of half human parts.
Little bit thing-like, actually.
Oh, it's awful. And then it plop in a good way, and then it drops into the molten metal and melts.
Which is the only way to kill it. And then
it does that thing where
that's a good bit. Yeah, you sort of see little glimpses of everything. It's kind of
impersonated.
Yeah.
Like the foster mom and the policeman, and it's like it's in its death throes. It can't control its own capabilities, but then it eventually melts away and dies.
Yeah, so that's a cool bit. And then you get quite a sad moment where Arnie basically sacrifices himself. He lowers himself into the hot lava, and
that's it.
Kills himself because can't leave any trace behind.
Yeah, he sacrifices himself to prevent Skynet from coming into existence, which is a noble act by that machine.
So that's kind of the end for me of the good Terminators. I think everything after is a little bit suspect, beginning with Terminator 3, which again was like 7 or 8. It was even longer, actually. It was about 11 years later.
Yeah, I think it came out.
I think it's 11 years later, that one.
It came out it's 2003. Directed by Jonathan Mostow, Terminator 3, The Rise of the Machines.
So 11 years later, and, instantly you're in sort of, it's almost a parody of itself. Arnie comes back, all the same kind of spots are in there. Arnie getting the clothes, only instead of getting them from like
a biker joint, it's like a strip club. He gets the kind of silly glasses instead of cool sunglasses. It's just,
and I'm fine with having a bit of comedy in it, but it felt kind of more organic. And T2's got some funny moments in, hasn't it?
But it was kind of relevant. So in T2, which I agree, by the way, I think Terminator 2, fantastic sequel, pair of almost a perfect film to me. It used to be my favourite film, Terminator 2.
Me too, yeah, when I was
for years.
A young lad. Yeah.
I think it's often heralded as one of the few examples of a sequel that's better than the original. I agree, but I also think the original is great.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame that all the sequels have been such a drop in quality.
I think if you look at it, I know you hate this term, but after Terminator 2, from Terminator 3 onwards, it has become a franchise.
Oh, yeah.
To the point where I think there was even like a Terminator ride at Universal Studios, that kind of thing.
But there's video games, some of them are half decent actually, but it's I'm not so much against the fact that there's spin-offs. It's just a shame that they couldn't. Did they really need to make 4 subsequent movies?
No.
Especially not one. Well, let's try and explain why they don't work. Terminator 3, very quickly, it's John Connor. He is now a grown man.
Yeah.
He has lost all of his sense of purpose because the apocalypse never came. So in effect, that means he was successful and they successfully prevented the rise of Skynet. Or does it mean it was all bollocks and he's a bit messed up as a result? Sarah Connor, his mother, has died in this movie of leukemia, I think it is. So he's alone in his early 20s. He's a drug addict. Just a loser, basically. A complete far cry from the hero that he's kind of touted as going on to be. But played by Nick Stahl, who also played the Yellow Bastard in Sin City.
Yeah, he was good in that.
I thought he did a good job.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't mind the idea that John Connor's got no purpose because Skynet's not a thing. But
because it was a pretty fucked up childhood.
Yeah, correct. It would have some impact on you.
Yeah.
I think the problem with this film comes not so much with that setup. It comes when we get the Terminator, where they've gone
Terminatrix.
Oh god, it's just. I mean, it's really sexist and dated, but you've got this really overly sexualized female Terminator, played by Kristanna Loken, who does a good job. Not her fault.
Yes, I mean, she's fine in it. Yeah.
The problem is they've got her doing things like using her liquid metal powers to inflate her boobs to distract a policeman, or she can identify people by tasting their blood.
Oh, yeah.
But for some reason she has to sort of lick it in a really sexy way. It's painful, you know?
And also, I just don't think she doesn't come across to me as being as dangerous as the T-1000.
Yeah, she's not a patch on Robert Patrick, because I agree with you, he's the best thing. I think he surpasses Schwarzenegger's level of menace in the first movie. And then on the side of good, so defending John, we have good old Arnie again, yet another reprogrammed T-800.
Which now, it is real bollocks.
It's like, so they got 2 of them, and it's getting a bit confusing. And then they chuck in this extra bit, which I don't necessarily mind, where it turns out that in the future, so Skynet hasn't been prevented but merely delayed. Judgment Day will therefore happen at a later date. John will still somehow go on to lead the resistance, which in itself sounds a bit implausible. Like, why does it have to be this one bloke? He'll be getting on a bit by then. Apparently he is killed in the future by a model T-800, T-101 Terminator, which is why they've got 2 of them and sent another. It's just starting to get a bit daft. But you wouldn't mind if that was all the backdrop or the excuse for a load of fun action scenes that were really cool. But they're just a bit phoned in.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember when it came out, it was... I think another problem, actually, when it came out, it was a 12, And the first Terminator, I think, was an 18. Now, we're not saying every film, it doesn't have to be an 18 to be, good. It doesn't have to be really violent or really sexy or lots of drugs and all that stuff. But it helps.
It was like a race for who was going to say that's very good.
But when basically they kind of, as I say, it became a franchise. They tried to make it how can we make it appeal to as many people as possible?
How can we make more money? Exactly. I know, let's make it a little bit softer so that we can get more kids in to watch it.
And so it really loses its edge, doesn't it?
Totally. It's just not... the whole film feels like brightly lit.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it all happens in the daytime and it's just this kind of jolly jaunt. You don't really feel any sense of true peril. It doesn't work like... Now, what I will say is, I came out of that movie at the time, I would have been, 19 or whatever, saying, that was garbage, I'm really angry, I'm so disappointed. When I rewatched it, obviously as research for this episode, I kind of didn't mind it, but I think it's to do with your expectation levels, isn't it? You know?
I think when it came out, it had been missing for a long time. The term, it had been gone for a long time, and people were excited for it.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, though, I even remember then thinking it was probably going to be a bit shit, but I did get kind of caught up in the hype. So I think my expectation levels were quite low, and I was just nonplussed by it. Yeah. I wasn't like angry, that was the worst film ever. I was just nonplussed by it.
No.
And I think I am to this day.
Agreed. And then we move on to another gap, again, 6 years this time, to 2009, Terminator Salvation, directed by McG.
Oh.
So apparently Joseph McGinty Nicol is known in the trade as McG.
Fair enough.
That's his name. So if you,
That's the most interesting thing.
No. Well, you've got Christian Bale playing John Connor. In effect, it's a prequel, so it's set it's in the future, which is the past from the perspective. It's about when John Connor meets Kyle Reese for the first time and sends him back. I like that we finally get to see this capable military leader, John Connor, and I've always liked Christian Bale. Think he's a good actor, albeit he did. He had a bit of a meltdown, didn't he?
To be honest, the most memorable thing about this film for me is Bale's meltdown. This was a time when. Yeah, he had this massive meltdown about somebody on set. I think it was a lighting guy or someone sort of walking in his shot.
Oh, and he just strips off him for about 5 minutes.
Getting fired. And about the same time, there were stories of him like having like very public spats with like his mum and I think his sister. So maybe
he comes across if you do find it still doing the rounds on the internet. Bale's infamous rant. People would obviously it was like a meme at the time, viral, and it just makes him sound horrible,
real dick.
And like he's just Patrick Bateman from American Psycho in real life. Like just not. He sounds crazy, like a crazy man.
Yeah.
There's actually a really funny, like, someone did like a dance remix of it. This guy called Revolution, like Lucian, L-U-C-I-A-N, Revolution. I'll see if I can find it. I might pop it on as the outro. A bit foul-mouthed, just to give you a pre-warning when you get to that bit. But hey, blame Christian Bale, don't blame us.
Honestly, whenever I think of Terminator Salvation, I think of that. That's kind of... So maybe it is a better film than I'm giving it credit for, but I can't get past that.
There's a daft plot where there's like a Terminator that doesn't know that it's a Terminator, so it therefore is the ultimate infiltration device. The only other thing I remember from Terminator Salvation is that they couldn't get Schwarzenegger at the time because he was too busy being a politician. This is when he was the governor of California or whatever he did. So they used his likeness on a at the time, it's 10 years old, impressive CGI T-800 that Christian Bale has to battle. And it was old school Arnie, so he's back to his muscle-bound peak. He's got his old-fashioned haircut, and he looks great. He doesn't last long until he gets his face blown off, so you don't want to sort of see behind the curtain, if that's the right phrase. Yeah. But I did, at the time, in the cinema, stand up and cheer that bit. Yeah. It was just a bit embarrassing.
I suppose the one thing I will say about Salvation as well is that at least they did something different with it.
Totally.
It wasn't that bad a film. Do you want to talk about what happens in it?
Just very briefly, John Connor meets Kyle Reese. They become friends. Kyle Reese joins the Resistance. Skynet attempts to thwart the human resistance using this new type of unwitting Terminator, which is played by Sam Worthington, who plays Marcus Wright, who does a decent job. He's a pretty likeable guy. But it fails as a plot, and human resistance continues. I think they were planning to do more sequels, but as has become a trend with Terminator movies, it didn't do very well at the box office, and therefore the subsequent planned sequels were axed. And we didn't see another Terminator until 2015's Terminator Genesis.
Which is a real turd.
So, let's not beat around the bush. Directed by Alan Taylor. Emilia Clarke is in it as Sarah Connor. Who, Game of Thrones, Daenerys. She's good. I had quite high hopes for it when I saw she was going to be in it. But she said of the director, who I think she'd worked with before, there's a quote I've got of, he was eaten and chewed up on Terminator. He was not the director I remembered. He didn't have a good time. No one had a good time.
And I think when it came to the point of saying, well, we're not really going to renew it, it didn't do as well as we'd hoped. I think she expressed publicly that she was kind of happy that it was just kind of canned.
She's glad she didn't have to do the sequels, because it is crap, innit? It's awful.
Well, again, it's that thing where we watched all of these films again recently. Again, my expectations very low. I hated it at the time. Expectations very low. I think I enjoyed it to some extent as an action film, just as a kind of turn your brain off, popcorn movie. It had its moments.
It's got some good ideas. This idea that we're on an alternate timeline, it's a bit of a remix. We get to see, again, another CGI'd young Schwarzenegger in the past get cut back to 1984, and old Schwarzenegger has to fight with it. I sort of like that idea, but it's the story around
so
it. So
convoluted.
Drivel, dross.
Alternative timelines and you've got to talk about old man Arnie.
You've took the words right out of my mouth. They explain the reason you've got an old... Because in Terminator 3, you could just about get away with it. It's just the same model. He kind of looks let's gloss on the fact he looks a bit older. By now, he's clearly old. He's got grey hair in it.
Yeah.
So they just say, Terminator's age. Didn't we tell you in any of the previous films they just get old? What? Why would they?
Emilia Clarke, who plays kind of a different version of Sarah Connor, calls him Pops.
Yeah, he's been protecting her for years.
Since she was like 9 or something, and it's just such a stupid...
The Kyle Reese that comes back to look after her, but the joke is that he's kind of superfluous to requirements, and him and the Terminator have a bit of banter. He's played by Jai Courtney. I've never been a fan of Jai Courtney.
I didn't mind him in that.
He's not the most charismatic bloke in the world.
And you don't like John Connor either, do you?
Oh, is it Jason Clarke plays John Connor? There are actually 2 Australians playing American characters. I just wonder if maybe some of their acting ability gets eroded when you're having to concentrate on doing a voice throughout something. Maybe I'm doing them a disservice, but I don't think either of them are remotely likeable as either a hero or villain in this film, because of course we get John Connor's been hacked by Skynet and turned into a half-human, half-Terminator that's then been sent back in time to trick them. Honestly.
And that's the crazy thing as well. He goes back in time to trick them, so he sees them at the police station. They're really happy to see him. They go out into the parking lot. Then we see old Pops come back, shoot him, because he knows this guy's a Terminator. But why didn't John Connor just kill them?
Yeah, he's had ample opportunity
but is it because if he kills them, he won't then exist?
But so what's he there for then?
He's there to kind of talk them into... I don't know.
It's real
stupid shit.
Drivel. So, don't bother watching it. Don't watch Terminator Genesis.
And then we come to the most recent film. It's probably, as you listen to this, still in the cinemas now.
Or certainly at the time of recording. Hopefully people will be listening to this for years to come, Liam.
Good point.
If you're listening to this in 2036...
They'll probably have rebooted it again.
It might be Judgment Day. It might have been and gone. You might be like in a little hunkered down hovel somewhere hiding from the Terminators.
The soundtrack of the Resistance.
And this will be the soundtrack of the Resistance. Very good. There you go.
This one, again, we won't go into spoiler territory because chances are you haven't seen it. I don't think many people have.
Well, apparently it's another shaping up for another box office.
As you said, they were planning to do like a new trilogy.
So why do they keep arrogantly saying, "Hey, we're so confident this movie's going to be great that we've got everyone signed up for 2 more"? What? Just don't tell us. Just do one movie. If it's any good, make a sequel. Yeah. Why do you have to announce a trilogy? It's so weird. I don't understand why they do that.
But one thing we will say, I think we both agreed on, is that it starts off okay. It's quite a promising opening. I was quite enjoying it.
Yeah, you've got the new villainous Terminator is a Rev 9, because we're into different nomenclature, because we've got a different version of Skynet that's now called... Anyway, just don't want no spoilers. So the Rev 9 is played by Gabriel Luna.
Who's good.
He's pretty cool.
Yeah, I liked him.
And the Defender of Humanity...
the one who's sent back.
Is played by Mackenzie Davis. She does a great job.
She was really good.
She's really good, I think. Really likeable. She comes across as sort of vulnerable but very capable at the same time. She's like I won't go into any more detail, but worth watching purely for her performance. I hope this kicks off a big career for her, because I think she's ace.
And I think sort of maybe a third of the way through, halfway through, is when it just turns into utter bollocks, and we both just it takes you out of it so much that you just kind of lose interest. I did anyway.
We've talked about how it's become, since Terminator 3, it's become harder and harder for them to crowbar Schwarzenegger in. How do you explain why there's a really old Terminator, even though they've all kept being destroyed? The explanation in this movie is so bad that we watched in the cinema together, didn't we? Looked at each other and just were like laughing, basically. It's so, oh God. So from that point, it's like, oh no, you switched off, not interested, this is rubbish. Which is a real shame. It feels like a real...
It had a bit of promise,
I know. But I must confess that I've seen a lot of reviews saying, well, at least it's, easily the third best of the series. I'm not even sure it's that much better than the other crap sequels. It is so far beneath Terminator 1 and 2 that it's just another also-ran.
Well, maybe this is a good time to perhaps rank the films.
Good shout.
As we did for the Halloween movies.
Well, final thought on Terminator Dark Fate, just before we move off that, is to say... I do like Linda Hamilton, and she is back in it. But even she...
I thought they'd made a very cartoonish...
parrot joke version of Sarah Connor, it almost felt like, didn't it?
It was just a bit too... very cliche, wasn't it? Like, I'm a badass with a drinking problem. Yeah. And yet, as you pointed out after we watched it, you never once see her with a drink.
I know. And we just to finish off as well, and the other main character is Dani Ramos, played by Natalia Reyes. She, again, fiery performance, good, pretty charismatic. It's a really strong female-centric cast of heroes, which is great, particularly relevant in this day and age. But I don't want to let it off the hook just because it's a really good feminist, positive message. It's still not that good a film, in my opinion.
Shite.
So, let's rank them then. What's the crappiest one?
Genesis.
Yeah, it's definitely Genesis. I spit on that movie. If I could go back in time, I'd go back in time and I would assassinate. No, that's a bit strong.
Yeah, that's very strong. You want to be careful.
I don't wish death upon any of its creators. I apologise. I just torture them a bit, like maim them,
like Am.
Like, exactly, I just keep them alive as my sinister plaything.
To write shit films.
So, Genesis, bottom of the pile.
So, Genesis, bottom of the pile. Maybe 3 then?
Yeah, then number 3. I hated it for years. Yeah. Maybe not that bad when you watch it back with no expectation and some vaguely decent sort of set piece. Not great.
I mean, this is where we may... differ. I probably would say Salvation, and then I would probably say the new one. But
no, I'll go with that. I'll give the new one.
I think the new one
promising opening, good performances in some cases, or in all cases, good performances, just not necessarily very well written characters.
Yeah. If they just change this one admittedly huge bit.
Oh, you'll know it when you see it as well. If you watch it,
then it could have been quite a decent effort. But
yeah, it does suffer.
So I will give it for that.
I'll go with that. And Salvation, therefore, in fourth place. Yeah. I do think merits a watch. It could because it's a bit
3
different.
Or 4, but yeah, and at least they're trying something different.
Whereas by a mile, untouchable, you've got Terminator 1 and 2. Are we agreed that Terminator 2 is actually the best movie in the series?
It was always, we're the same here, it was always one of my favourite films growing up. I think it was my favourite film. I remember having it on video, VHS video, buying it, yeah.
And I think when I did that as well, I remember finding out that there were loads of cut bits that I'd never seen because it used to always get edited down on the TV for time, or whether they were just trying to cut out some of the more gory bits. So there was all this extra horrible stuff that I was like, So,
but yeah, I would have T2 as the number 1 film, and well, to sum up, I suppose.
Please do. Do. Oh, I will just ask very quickly: other Terminator media worthy of mentioning? Is there any?
There is, interestingly, as we record this, there's a new video game coming out. I think it's in December, called Terminator Retribution.
Look any good?
It actually looks okay. It's like a first-person shooter game. I think it's set in the future. I think it could be one of those good kind of like AA video games, like that we used to get so many of that we don't really anymore.
Now
everything now is like
extremes,
AAA blockbuster or an indie game.
Yeah.
This to me looks like it could be like a respectable sort of 3 out of 5. You play it on a weekend.
And I remember fondly on the Sega Mega Drive, which of course ironically is called the Sega Genesis in America, but don't worry because this is not as bad as Terminator Genesis, was RoboCop versus Terminator. That was a good laugh.
That was a laugh. They used to have some like pretty functional platform games. I remember one on the Commodore playing that. That was just basically the second film. But
I don't think there's any must-have, must-buy other Terminator media.
Interesting. I'll tell you the one thing you should check out, actually, is Terminator as a guest character in the new Mortal Kombat.
Oh, is it?
DLC.
I didn't know that.
The fatality is awesome.
Oh, go on. What is it? What's the fatality?
So, it basically, sort of pins their legs down, like shoots their legs, then sends them into the future in one of those, the big...
Like a blue blob
of electricity. So when they get into the future, their legs have been basically cut off, so they're crawling along, and then an actual an actual robot just comes out and blasts it in the face. You've got to see it.
They're getting good at... Whoever's got the gig of writing the fatalities in the Mortal Kombat games now seems to be enjoying themselves.
And they've also had a bit of a crossover in the new Gears of War game and like the multiplayer and stuff. So again, it's that thing about it being a franchise now.
I think the thing is, you can't really go wrong. Well, you can go wrong because they've gone very wrong in a lot of these films, but just, it's cool, isn't it? It's a metal skeleton. An unstoppable metal skeleton. How'd you mess that up? Yeah. It's a great image.
In closing...
Please.
The first 2 are so good that I think you can ignore the shit sequels.
Yeah. We've had this before, haven't we?
We've had this many times,
The original work is so high quality that the fact that it's sadly then been dragged out into this interminable franchise is... If you ignore all of the dross that's come subsequently and just focus on the first 2 movies, there's such classics that how could I refuse entry into the Hall of Pain?
Ha ha ha.
So welcome.
Well, it is.
It's in. It's in.
For real?
Honestly, I mean it. I know you were worried that it might not get in. Yeah. You looked like you were sweating a bit, and I was worrying you got a bit pale and like almost rotten. Like maybe your flesh has just been plastered onto a metal endoskeleton.
You're terminated.
Very good. Hey, I'll tell you one thing. This podcast sure is terminated.
Don't say that. What, we've been cancelled?
I just meant we're going to stop recording now. Okay. That's all. Don't worry, we'll be back next time.
Okay.
For more dark natterings.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hasta la vista.
Babies.
Do you want me to go fucking trash your lights? Do you want me to fucking trash them? Fuck! And what the fuck is it with you?
I was looking at the light.
Fuck! And what the fuck is it with you?
I was looking at the light.
Fuck! And what the fuck is it with you?
I was looking at the light.
Fuck! And what the fuck is it with you?
I was looking at the light.
It's fucking distracting. Oh, good! It's fucking distracting. Oh, good!
Thank you for joining us once again for another frightful instalment of Dark Natter. If you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a positive review. Whereas if you hated it, then please feel free to send us a deluge of abuse at darknatterpodcast@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with us via Instagram @darknatterpodcast or on Twitter @dark_natter. We'd love to hear your suggestions for future contenders for the Hall of Pain. Please also check out our YouTube channel, Dark Natter, where you'll mainly find Liam and me embarrassing ourselves trying to play scary games and screaming like babies. And in a final shameless plug, I would love it if you'd pop across to www.jon-richter.com. That's where you'll find my assorted works of dark fiction, including my new short story collection, Jon Richter's Disturbing Works Volume 2, available now on Amazon in paperback or for your e-reader device. It only remains to say thank you again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
You fucking understand. I'm gonna fucking kick your fucking ass.